Welcome to episode 234. Today I'm interviewing Robin Whitten, founder and editor of AudioFile magazine. Learn about their recently launched podcast, Behind the Mic with AudioFile magazine. Plus, Robin shares a few recommendations. Stay tuned. Hey everyone, I'm your host, Tamara Ford, and welcome to Book Chat here on the Shelf Addiction Podcast. Here on Book Chat, we get bookish with roundtable book discussions, book recommendation lists, interviews, and more. Be sure to check out shelfaddiction.com for even more content. Before we get started, let me tell you a bit about today's interview guest. Robin Whitten is the founder and editor of AudioFile magazine, 25 years young and taking on today's challenges of information publishing. Starting in 1992, AudioFile reviews and recommends audiobooks as a multi-platform resource, publishing in print, e-newsletters, the AudioFile magazine website, and seasonal programs like Audiobook Sync for teen audiences. Robin currently serves on the board of directors of the Audio Publishers Association as VP of Member Communications. Beyond the field education of starting a magazine, Robin attended Stanford's publishing program and is a graduate of Vassar College. She lives in Portland, Maine, where AudioFile is based. If you'd like to comment on something you've heard during today's episode, you can find me on Twitter or Instagram at Shelf Addiction. Links for everything related to today's episode are below in the show notes. Hey, Robin, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
I'm fine. I'm so glad to be talking with you.
Absolutely. I'm super excited to have you on because, as my listeners know, I love audiobooks. I love them so much. I always review them. I talk about them. I advocate for them. So I'm especially happy that you're here today.
Well, I can talk about audiobooks all day long, so let's do it.
Okay. So you are the founder and editor of AudioFile magazine, and now it's the Behind the Mic with AudioFile magazine podcast. What motivated you and your team to delve into the podcasting world?
Well, we have been making recommendations for audiobooks for over 25 years. And it always seemed to me, even when podcasts were very brand new and you had to explain what they were to everyone, that it was natural to have a podcast about audiobooks because audiobooks, is an audio medium. It's a natural fit. But it took me quite a while to figure out what was the best, form of recommending audiobooks for AudioFile in the podcast platform.
So tell me a little bit about what makes your podcast unique. Like, what is your format? Because I think you have short everyday things, right?
Right. So, Behind the Mic with AudioFile magazine has just launched in September. So we're brand new, with this podcast, and we, publish an episode, 5 days a week, daily. We publish a short recommendation of one audiobook. And we do it with a host, Joe Reed, who's our host, wonderful host, with a great experience doing interviews and book talks and all that. And she talks with one of the AudioFile editors or reviewers, and in conversation, recommending one audiobook each episode. And then we play a little clip. From the audiobook. And they are really 4 or 5 minutes long, very short.
I love that. It's like little bite-sized pieces that you can listen to really quickly in the morning or whenever you get up and see the podcast is there.
Yeah. And we've tried a little bit, we have a consistent host. So Joe is on every day but we are switching week to week from, I do 1 week. Our publisher, Michelle Cobb, does 1 week. One of our editors, Emily Connolly, is doing a week. And then we have a reviewer, Jonathan Smith, who is doing a week of his recommendation. So each of us will pick the 5 books for the week, do all the research, get it all ready, and then we record with Joe each episode for a week. And so it sort of changes it up because you're listening to me. You wouldn't want to listen to me every day. So then next week it's, Jonathan, or it's Michelle who, talks about the books she's recommending very differently than the ones that I do.
Not only that, you get a big variety of flavors of what you're recommending when you switch it up like that.
Right. And, if you don't like what I was recommending this morning, then, you don't have to wait long until tomorrow and I'm doing something different.
Absolutely.
So, and sometimes we're just learning this, but sometimes I'm recommending something I'm really excited about, and Jo is a little lukewarm. She's not saying, "Oh, I can't imagine why anybody would listen to this," but you can tell she's it's not her choice. But then when I hit one that she's really enthusiastic about, then all the enthusiasm comes out. So you get a real conversation. I guess that's what it is, but that's what's fun about podcasts, isn't it?
Absolutely. So I'd love to know how you guys compile your recommendations. I know you each get your own, but do you have little helpers in the background helping you spot these gems, or do you search for them yourselves?
Well, it's all of us is them is what it amounts to. I mean, there aren't very many of us at AudioFile in the office here. We have 3 full-time people who are working on the various, not just the podcast, but we are publishing 50 audiobooks reviews a week. We're publishing a print magazine. We have newsletters. We've got a website. We got all these things going on. And so the podcast, adding this into our already busy lives, is very interesting, and we're learning. But one of the things that we do is everything that AudioFile does is informed by our reviews. So the first thing, we don't recommend books unless we have a review in hand. So it's not because, it's going to be a bestseller or the publisher really thinks it's great. We don't want to talk about it until somebody has actually heard it as an audiobook.
That's awesome.
That's where the rubber hits the road. It may be a great book. It may be written as a great book, but until the performance is great, we don't want to say this is a great audiobook.
And that's what makes you guys reliable as well, because it's not just, hey, the publisher pushing this on you and that's what you're regurgitating. You guys have heard it.
Yeah. And we've been caught out a couple times early on where we said, "Oh, it sounds great, great, great." And then when it came through, it was maybe not so great. Not quite as great. And so now we had to temper the enthusiasm, and now we just wait until we hear it.
Good plan. So let me ask, do you guys ever recommend indie audiobooks?
Oh, we do. We absolutely do. We have great connections with a lot of self-published authors and indie publishers who are, not just their own books, but they have a small list. And we think that that's a great resource for listeners who maybe want something different, maybe want to try a new author they haven't heard about. And so we do review indies, and we often, we recommend them. Their reviews are published on our website, and all our reviews are published on our website, which is audiofilemagazine.com, and they're all available by search to anyone who's on the site. There's no entry, there's no bar to entry. But we love indies, and, we like to hear sometimes the backstory about them, and, but we wait for the review, same as the big guys.
Yes.
So I was going to tell you just how we pick the audiobooks that we're going to recommend on our podcast, because we sort of start with what we call the review of the day. Now, the review of the day is a title that usually goes up on our social first. It's a review, maybe just arrived, something we're very excited about, maybe on the release date of the actual book if we've gotten an early copy. And so we have a review of the day, and those are the ones we look at first for a podcast episode and see, if it's of interest. In particular, for one of the editors or reviewers who's going to talk, we like to try to find some personal connection to whatever we're talking about. For instance, a couple weeks ago, we talked about the new Karen Slaughter book, and Michelle has interviewed her a couple times, several times. So she was very excited. We kind of put up a list, we circulate a list, and someone says, "Oh, I'm really interested in that. And, I'll take that one." Or, let me add to this list because I haven't found 5 this week that I really want. And we try to do quite new books. We don't want to delve back too far. I mean, backlists are wonderful, but, we're trying to, be recommending new books.
Awesome. So I've got to know, how many audiobooks a week do you listen to doing this?
Well, I could say I listen to every single one, but we actually have over 100 audiobook reviewers. So a big part of AudioFile is finding which books we're going to review, assigning them to reviewers, getting the perfect match between the reviewer and the title, we hope, and then getting the reviews back, getting them edited, figuring out, getting them published. So, a lot of my job is talking to reviewers, assigning books, not as much listening as you might think. So if I get an entire book in a week, then I'm doing well. Because it's a little bit like, when I go home, maybe, I do other media and I talk to my husband and I take a walk in the garden.
It's good to do other things besides only listen to audiobooks.
Right. And since my day job is audiobooks, then I try to, have a little time when I'm not. But, I started this because I was an avid listener. That's how I, came to audiobooks in the first place, as a listener. So, I will often get completely hung up on a title or an author, a series. And so in my spare time, in my personal time, I'm just as hooked as any other listener.
That's good to hear, because I love to talk about audiobooks with other audiobook lovers and listeners. So I know we'll have a great conversation coming up next about our next topic.
Okay.
Where can people find Behind the Mic? Where can they subscribe?
So all of the podcatchers, iTunes, Google Play, Android apps. We publish on Stitcher. We publish on Libsyn, and so Stitcher is one of them. Apple Podcasts that are in your iPhone. Pretty much anywhere.
All the usual places. Yeah.
All the usual places. Right.
Yeah.
And everybody has their favorites.
Yeah, for sure.
But don't you love I love the word podcatchers.
Yeah.
I think that, I'm not even sure that very many people use it, but when I saw it, I thought, oh, I love that.
Yeah, it's great, because the podcatchers, really, honestly, most of them just pull from iTunes or, Apple Podcasts. Let me correct that, because I don't want my hand slapped for saying iTunes, because that's bad. But yeah, they all pull from Apple Podcasts. So no matter, most of these apps that you can get in either app store, they pull from the main feed. So you're good. You're golden no matter what you use.
Well, I don't know. I don't know very much about that, but we're having fun doing this, and we'll see how it goes. But it should be easy to find Behind the Mic with AudioFile magazine. So
Absolutely. And you guys, I totally recommend this podcast. I actually listened to this for 5 days straight and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I had to do my research, guys. So yes, it's an amazing podcast. And of course, I subscribe to their newsletter as well. So all of the links are below in the show notes. You'll have a couple of podcast links as well. So if you'd like to subscribe, it is right there for you to click right in the show
Great.
notes. Okay,
Great.
so let's talk about our topic. I really want to touch base on like a couple of things, especially like advocacy for audiobooks and, where they are right now, why people are loving them right now, and why the vision of, why audiobooks used to be such a taboo thing and now everyone's loving it. So let's cover all the things.
Okay, where should we start?
Let's start with like why everyone loves audiobooks right now. Like, why are we all listening?
Well, we're all busy and we're trying to get as much reading in as possible. So many of us are book lovers, but really we're all story lovers. And, audiobooks are such a great way to have more reading time, get more stories that completely fuel your imagination, and you can, take time out from a busy day, or get information about topics in our culture and around the world that you might be interested in. And that's all there in audiobooks. You're carrying it around. The audiobooks are in your phone. It makes it so easy. I mean, that's really probably a pivotal point in audiobooks, is the downloadable audiobooks from Audible or other services. It just, you can get them so easily. I mean, I'm sure that everybody, many of the people who are listening remember, either dropping a box of cassettes or trying to fumble around with the CDs, trying to figure out where you are, hoping it's not going to go back to the track 1 when you're on track 12. All those very frustrating things about listening to audiobooks in hard media.
Especially from the libraries, because you can actually use Overdrive and Libby and other things to gain access to the MP3 files from your library. So if you don't want to spend the money, you can definitely rent them from the library too, without them being on CD, although they still have them.
Yep. No, absolutely. The libraries have always been, when we talk about where our support for audiobooks and for the audio format have come. I mean, libraries have always been there for audiobooks. They were early adopters in their collections, in supporting it on a national association level, like the ALA awards. I mean, really, libraries have always been there, and they've continued to change as the formats have changed, and listen to patrons. Yay, libraries.
Yeah, absolutely. I love libraries, and I do love services as well. Because, like, if I'm really honest, I have several services that I pay monthly for because that's how much I love audiobooks. So it's a problem, but it's a great problem to have. Let me tell you.
It is a great problem to have. And, I always, one of the things that I used to say about the media, when you had hard media, it seems so strange that you would have a book that was basically unbound, like the pages were loose, and you would be trying to shuffle them around to get them in order and to play to read the pages in order. We don't have to do that anymore, because streaming audiobooks make it easy to just start where the book and the audiobook starts, and finish on the last word. Yeah,
absolutely. And plus, for those of you, honestly, that kind of just are anti-audiobooks, guess what? I got news for you. You can actually, if you really want to combined reading with audiobooks, you can actually use like Amazon and Kindle. That's not a commercial for them, but it's a great feature. So I love it. I got to say, I read and listen a lot.
It is interesting. And I think that there has been sort of disparaging of audiobooks for so long that it's not really reading or that it's cheating, and this is old debate. But oftentimes I find that people who will say that, you don't want to be too rude and say, well, when was the last time you listened to an audiobook? You find out that actually they don't do that. They haven't tried it. So they're just sort of echoing this, saying this is a lesser form of life. And, I think there's been just a real shift. And one of the things that's interesting, Tamara, is that the research now is showing that the majority of listeners are under the age of 45.
Yeah.
So that puts the biggest group of listeners into a media savvy demographic that might not have been there before.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's made, that's where the growth for listeners is. Mm-hmm. That's where we're seeing such a terrific interest in young adult literature. And use of audiobooks as people, do all their daily things, including being at home and relaxing at home. And something interesting that's coming on about listening is all the smart speakers. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, do you have do you have Alexa or one of the smart speakers?
I do. And I do use it for audiobook listening while I'm cooking.
There you go. Yeah. How easy is that?
Yep.
No wires to get tangled up in, while you're stirring.
Exactly.
Or any of that. Yeah.
I mean, you can't necessarily watch TV while you're cooking because you're chopping, you are occupied with your hands and your eyes, but your ears are free. So you can listen to an audiobook.
Right. And presumably you can say, I haven't tried this yet, but I'm dying to, is, you can say pause mm-hmm. and you'll stop for a second.
Yes. And it syncs with your phone too. So if you go back to your phone, you haven't lost your spot. So it's awesome.
Oh, that is awesome. That is awesome. It's terribly frustrating to be going back and forth trying to find, oh man, I don't want to hear that. I want to get back to where I was.
Yeah, absolutely. But as far as that stigma, as a reviewer, I feel like the community as book reviewers, it's transforming as well. And I know most of the reviewers are indeed under 45. There are some that are not, but I think even reviewers at some point kind of had that you're not really reading unless you're holding a book in your hand. And that has totally started to transform. And I see that firsthand just amongst fellow reviewers that I talk to. They are starting to incorporate audiobooks into their reading diet. And I can't be more happy about it.
Yeah, that is great. And, I think one of the little catalysts for that is that book clubs. I know several people who used to feel that if they had listened to the book that the book club was reading, then maybe somehow they had cheated a little. And now it's like that's what everybody, a lot of people are doing that. So now it's not, you don't have to hide the fact that maybe you listened, because now you can talk about the fact that you listened, and everybody, the other people in the group will say, yeah, that was so cool. That voice, that narrator. Yeah. There's a whole nother thing to talk about.
Totally. And we do that in book club. We really do. We talk about the narrator. We talk about, especially when there's more than one, we talk about how they fit the characters. Did we find that it was easier to consume an audiobook? And actually, a lot of people do that in book clubs. They'll start reading it, and for whatever reason, they're not taking to it. Mm-hmm. And I always recommend they switch to the audio. And miraculously, most of the time, it's suddenly better when they switch. If they're not liking it, and then they switch to audio, and it's like, oh, it's definitely more palatable this way.
Yeah. And, if you have a great performance with a narrator, they're going to hook you. They're going to reel you in just the way the author intended. That's the magic of it all.
Absolutely. Okay. So since we are in a new season, it's now fall. I thought it would be a great chance to hear some recommendations from you, to hear, what you recommend for the rest of this year. Do you have a couple recommendations for us?
I do. You were asking for the for some recommendations for me from me, and I've got a few. But I was thinking, oh man, a lot of the big books we have not listened to them yet because they're not out.
Oh,
So between now and the end of the year, there are going to be a lot more books coming. But I have some great ones. I mean, one of the top titles that's probably on so many people's list is Kate Atkinson's Transcription.
mm-hmm.
And, it's on lots of reading lists, but I can tell you that the narrator, Fenella Woolgar, what a name. That's so fabulous. Does such a great job with Kate's title. And there's a combination of sort of a little bit cheeky, since it's British, cheeky part of the story of this little bit of gossip and little things going on. It's a little snarky. And yet there's an intimacy that is, that Fenella creates that is just right. It is just what the author intended. Mm-hmm. And then she has all these wonderful, a whole lot of character studies, small, minor characters. And, she gives them real personality with performance. It's a great audiobook.
Wonderful. I like that recommendation. I'm looking forward to that one, actually.
Yes. And then there's another one that is interesting. Pat Barker, who is known for her Regeneration trilogy about World War I, has completely switched up to a new topic with The Silence of the Girls, which is an very interesting retelling of the Iliad, not of the whole Iliad, and the siege of Troy from a woman's point of view. And it's Achilles is hot at the moment, I guess, because just a year ago, Madeline Miller's Song of Achilles was the rage, fabulous book. Her take is totally different on Achilles. The Silence of the Girls is from a woman's point of view, and it has two narrators, Kristen Atherton and Michael Fox, and which is interesting. But there are a lot of men, of course, in the story, even though it's from a woman's point of view. But I think it makes it very nice. There's this dual narration is very nice in this performance. And Pat Barker is an amazing writer. So there's that.
Do you have another?
Oh, I have, you can keep me going. Here's one that might not be on everybody's list. Those two have gotten a lot of attention for their books. But Washington Black by Essie Adugan, and it is read by Dion Graham. So lots of listeners love performances by Dion Graham, as I do. And this is a very unusual, somewhat of an adventure story about a slave who escapes via hot air balloon. So,
wow.
So it's wild. The premise is a bit wild. But it's also, there's a duality in this, is that the grim reality of slavery in the 1800s, is also part of this story. But I think because it's perhaps, leavened a little bit because of the adventure, it's very, it's great. And Dion Graham always does a spectacular job.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you for those recommendations. I will be checking all three of those out. I'll at least be listening to the samples to see if that's something I want to check out from my library or buy. You know how we do.
I know. Just, and you can always on the AudioFile site, we always have the reviews, as I said, and, sound clips, and, The Silence of the Girls has been a topic for our podcast. So you can check it out that way too.
Well, thank you so much, Robin. I really appreciate you taking the time to come and share about your podcast and giving us these recommendations.
It's been lovely. I'm so glad to chat with you, and we can always talk about audiobooks at any time, Tamara.
Oh, wonderful. Okay, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Shelf Addiction Podcast. Don't miss out on Behind the Mic with AudioFile magazine. Again, you can find the links for all of those different topics we talked about today. You can find links for Apple Podcasts. You can find links for Google Podcasts and a few others as well in the show notes. And don't forget to sign up for their newsletter. It's fun stuff. So until next time, happy reading, everyone. Take care. If you enjoyed today's book chat episode and would like to show your support, there are a few things you can do. Head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave a positive 5-star review. You can follow me on Twitter at Shelf Addiction. Most importantly, you can share this podcast with friends and family that enjoy all things bookish, including author interviews. Thank you for listening, and until next time, happy reading.